Hi folks, it's John from lastchanceautorestore.com. I'd like to share with you an update. This is the engine I guess disassembled for the 1970 Volkswagen Single Cab pickup truck. You can recall in earlier videos we were doing a complete restoration on the 70 Single Cab, and then our client, before he hooked up with us, he sent his engine to have it rebuilt. Someone that he had found that was referred to. So our client was told that the engine was rebuilt. It was all high-end quality parts, nothing offshore, nothing made in China kind of stuff. And it was claimed to be properly rebuilt. And they claimed that the engine, instead of being a stock 38 horsepower, it was suggested that it was somewhere in the 80 horsepower range. So in an earlier video we shared with you where we had it on our engine stand. We had set gas to it and we started it up. We checked the valves. They had adjusted them before the engine got to us. So we started it up and it ran, and we filmed the running of the engine, and there was a vibration that I'm not sure the film could detect, but it had a little bit of a mist to it, but there was a big vibration that we felt. And we were thinking or hoping it was going to be something in the generator in the doghouse area where it attaches. But now we're going to take a closer look. So our client lives far away from where we are, so I'd just like to share with you what our findings are. So this engine, what we see is certainly nowhere near what our client was told in terms of horsepower rating. So there's a few things that our client was asking. Number one is the engine that was sent to the person to rebuild, the actual case is different. This case does not have our client's serial number on it. So we were hoping that they replace the crankshaft with a stroker style, which would then mean you would change the case or bring a case in that would accommodate the stroker crankshaft, which would give you somewhere in that, say, 80 to 85 horsepower kind of thing. But after we open it up and we carefully look at some things, it is a stock crankshaft. So I think the camera can zoom in because we have quite a few concerns, or just things to point out that we've discovered while we're looking at it. So first of all, we're looking at the crankshaft here, and I'm quite sure the camera can pick it up. We have B10, which is just a production number, but you can see the VW logo that's stamped in the actual cast of the crankshaft, and then we have another letter up over here. So we did the research. This crankshaft is just a standard stock crank. I'm not sure whose connecting rods they are, but there's nothing special about the connecting rods. And then as we look at things closer, we have some concerns. So first of all, our camshaft that we have is a stock cam. So when you're trying to get additional horsepower out of it, now it looks like it's been replaced, but you can see here we've got some part numbers. It's a no-name or aftermarket camshaft, and you can see the part number. So this is not a Volkswagen part or a German part, and you can see I just took that bearing off of there, and I'm quite certain the camera can pick it up. We've got quite a bit of uneven wear. So we can see on the outside edges we've got some additional wear compared to having it even. So that's just on one of them, and then the camera can probably pick this one up. So this is the other half of that, and once again you can see, I don't know if it's too much glare or not, I don't think so. So on this side you can see the wear. So whenever you see uneven wear on a brand new bearing, so our client was told that it was completely rebuilt, all higher end stuff, and higher horsepower rating, and it's just not. So so we have some concerns there because we've got basically a stock crank, no name connecting rods, but there doesn't seem to be any damage there, but we've got a lot of uneven wear on all the bearings, which this engine hasn't run very long because it was rebuilt and then they adjusted the valves and started it to break the motor in. So we ran the engine for roughly 4 minutes or so after checking all the fluids, and we have a lot of uneven wear. So starting at the crankshaft and connecting rods and bearings, we obviously have some concerns with the bearings. We're very discouraged or disappointed in the camshaft because a stock cam and stock crankshaft is going to do nothing for you to double or more than double the horsepower. Now, something that the client wasn't fibbed to about was the brand of the pistons. These are a Mealy piston. It has the mark on it. The camera might not be able to pick it up, but you can see all of the carbon. So essentially, there's a lot of buildup here already, and it's really oily and stuff. And we shouldn't have. I'll just clean it off here. I think the camera can pick it up. So these are bigger piston and ring sets. So the pots, the pistons, and the rings is a kit you can buy aftermarket, and it is a good brand name. This is an M symbol, which means Mealy, and it has a production number on it, and it's 91.93, which is a 92 mil is what they refer to it as. So basically what they try to do is turn it into a higher horsepower motor, and by saying it's an 1800 or 1815 engine, you can't get that by just replacing the pistons without increasing other capacity. So essentially what we're looking at is everything in the lower end is stock, and then we have aftermarket heads. These are a no-name head that you can buy on like eBay and so on. So these are an offshore. They're not an MP head, and you can see all the carbon buildup once again on the inside. So they are larger valves, and then we've got a part number here. But these are made in China. There's no MP number stamped on them, so it's a copy of a Volkswagen number, and there's nothing special about these heads. So they're just an aftermarket offshore head with bigger valves. And then the reason why we have so much buildup, here's our other head here, and you can see uneven burning in the valves themselves. So whoever this chap was that tried to build this motor for the client thought what he could do was go bigger pistons and pots, bigger valves, using a single carburetor, changing the seat and pin, and forcing more fuel in to give you more power. But unfortunately it won't work with that setup. The other thing that we see on these pistons, which I forgot to mention earlier, is we have basically there's some damage to basically all four corners of the back of the piston. So if I hold this, I think that the camera can probably pick it up. So you can see it's a Mealy piston, which is great, but then on basically all four corners, which there's damage to all four. I think the camera can probably pick that up. So I'm assuming what's happening is there must be a clearance issue because we've got some scoring and fine metal. So there must be a clearance issue somewhere between the crankshaft and these pistons, because if I look at the other piston, I'll just move this clip, same idea. Now we've got oil in here, but you can see where my pen goes, there's an indentation there. So essentially at all four corners once again. So we've got, I think with the lighting we can probably see all that. So rather than boring you with a whole bunch of look at this and look at that, we obviously have some issues there. Let's put these back the way they were. And then it kind of gets better. So when we're looking at these, the pistons, and then we see the scoring here, the camera can get closer. I'm not sure who machined these, but obviously, so this case, you can see the two holes. There's some machining that needs to take place for the pistons to have clearance, but they're not square. So you can see this ridge that comes across here. I'm not sure how they machined it, but if you look at this portion compared to this bottom shoulder, they're not even. They're quite a difference. And I think if I turn it this way, the camera can probably pick up the way they're machined. So this part looks like it was hooked up in a machine properly and bored so that we can accept the pots, but then you have these notches that they've made to try and clear, and then you can see the ridges all along here where it's all uneven and they're not even with the opposite end. So the problem or issue that you have with that is under higher RPMs, and you can see we've got some little nicks and there's some little marks across there already, and it wasn't high revving. So if you're going to have these machined, you have them machined so that the piston has clearance and these are bored properly and squared true, and then also clearance with the connecting rods. The other thing that they kind of made a little bit of a boo-boo on is on these pots. And I can show you there's residue here. So when these pots slide onto the block, Volkswagen never wants to have any type of caulking or sealant because there's expansion that happens between the block and these pots. And you can clearly see they've used a caulking material, this sealant, and you can see it's already becoming brittle. So when they went to torque it down, they've got this caulking, so they did a bead of caulking around the pot and around the block itself, and then they torqued it down. But unfortunately, you can see how brittle it is already, and you don't do that because it changes the spec of the torque because you've actually put a product between the pot and the actual block itself. So anybody who builds the air-cooled engines, you never do this. You never put caulking or a sealant between the two. So not to pick it apart, it's just one of those unfortunate things where someone thinks they're getting you know, a rebuilt engine. It's built properly, and everyone has their own way of doing things, but the proof is in the pudding. When you look at all of the markings on it, you have everything is bone stock, with the exception of pistons. So a bigger piston, bigger valves is not going to give you that 80-90 horse kind of thing. So it's kind of unfortunate. So the other thing that we noticed was, and I think we mentioned in the earlier video, this oil cooler, they used the original oil cooler. So we don't know how many miles or kilometers have been put on this engine or were on the engine when they rebuilt it, but they used the original oil cooler. Pardon me, it's highly recommended that you would replace this, especially when you're rebuilding an engine and going with a higher horsepower. You want to make sure, because there's always residue and buildup in here. So I would suspect, but I can't prove it, if the oil cooler isn't replaced, that could be the reason why these bearings have uneven wear, because you've got some not completely clean oil going through the engine because you're relying on an oil cooler that had some kind of residue sitting in it. So I would assume perhaps that's why we have this uneven bearing wear, but I'm not an expert by any means, I'm not sure, but I think that would probably be a factor in it. So just wanted to share with you, so this engine, we're going to have to figure out what our client would like to do, because he wanted to do a Highway Flyer upgraded transmission, and when you go Highway Flyer, you require a lot more power for the engine itself, and that's where he's hoping he's getting the 80 horsepower plus. So we'll just share this with our client and figure out what we're going to do next, and then we'll share with you what the gentleman who built the engine will do for our client, and then we'll go from there. So I thank you for watching. I'm John from lastchanceautorestore.com.